Rain can be medicine for the landscape. But the prescription for such a remedy is delicate, one that must be followed rather precisely. Too much, and the balm becomes a destructive contaminant. In the days and weeks leading up to January 1st, 1997, Jackson County, and Oregon at large, were overdosing at a level that hadn't been seen for decades.
A lot of people focus on, well, this is the New Year's flood of 97, like it was one, big rain and one flood, but it wasn't. It was, it was over the course of over a month. We were getting pummeled with storms since late November, and it was widespread. There was flooding and landslides and rock slides from Washington to Idaho to Oregon to California and even into Western Nevada. So it was a huge area that was getting hit by storms.
These storms are at the hand of weather events called atmospheric rivers, massive currents in the sky. It's where the jet stream and tropical moisture can mix. And over time, the storms got warmer and wetter. The recorded precipitation that heralded the flooding is a sobering data set. In December 1996, the nearby Medford Airport received almost 10 inches of rain, more than half the rain the area will typically see in a year. The only year to beat it was the Christmas Day flood of 1964, a once-in-a-century event that pummeled Oregon and other parts of the Pacific Northwest, left dozens dead, and caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage.
It was incredible, and especially looking at it today, with all these droughts we've been having, it's hard to imagine all this wet weather. Here we are in a severe to extreme drought, and we've had a number of severe to extreme droughts over the last 5-6 years. So the mid to late 90s were very wet years.
Interestingly, 1996 saw no La Niña or El Niño, oceanic temperature changes that can mean much wetter conditions along much of the U.S. West Coast. But even in spite of them, an assault of wet weather was underway as cold air from the north and tropical air from the south met and hurled to the east. Add in saturated soils, mountain snowpack, and stream levels that are already fairly high, and you have a recipe for a flood. And the town of Ashland was right in this one's path.
So we knew the temperatures were going to go up. Whatever snow was there on the mountain was going to come down. Brian Almquist, who was city manager administrator at the time, he was aware of what was going to happen. Brian went around to all of the plaza businesses, knocked on the doors and said, yeah, you need to clear out what you can, expect a flood.
We watched the creek all the time. So the creek, our back door, was out onto Kaiwanawato, and it had been rising and rising, and of course it was a very wet year, and we were just on alert.
And it wasn't just water embarking on the small town.
The main problem was it was a debris dam that caused the biggest flood, when it broke loose. I mean, there were huge boulders and root balls and stuff that were going down the creek at that time.
I think the flood probably caught us off guard. It was new enough for our fire department and the small crew of people that we had at the time, just to be an ambulance transport business and a fire department. I was off duty that day, and then there was a couple of us that were pretty regularly working a lot of ambulance shifts and fire shifts. And we tried to come in when we knew things were really unfolding downtown. Roads were getting blocked off, the silt was filling up businesses, and we came in thinking, wow, they're gonna call us back. And I can remember talking to the captain that was on duty at the time, and he's looking at us like, what are you doing? Nobody's calling 911 right now. I remember my partner and I kind of looked at each other and were like, yeah, but I mean, aren't they going to? And we didn't know. And so that very first night when things started going, we weren't on duty. At least I wasn't, and a couple of the other guys weren't. And so we decided to go help as citizens.
A key part of necessary response was preparing and stacking sandbags to divert the wet onslaught.
We went down to the plaza and the water was coming out of the main channel and was out right at the beginning of the park, that grassy area. And so we tried to take sandbags and make a dike across the road and out toward the park there to funnel the water back behind Guanajuato Way and get it back into the creek. I think we were kind of behind, and so it made it very difficult, and there was just so much that we weren't able to really build it far enough, fast enough.
I don't believe that there was meaningful information about how high to expect the water to be or the volume. So the initial efforts just to actually protect the businesses were just blown out. There were not enough resources, not enough people to put them together. When the debris from the Ashland Creek stopped up at the bridge there on Windburn Way, then that was it.
There was water everywhere. The creek was full, overflowing. I don't really recall exactly the timing on when there was water in the park, but above the park, up the creek, were debris jams, some mudslides, some new construction stuff that had contributed. The building right on the upper end, what we call the Parkview building, or it was called the Parkview building, has a basement. And some of the buildings have basements and some don't. Our building did not have a basement, it just had a crawl space. So when they tried to redirect the water and it was pushing into that upper building, which then filled with rock, the water was coming in through the mortar joints in the brick. So it was like little waterfalls. And then the water, because of the basement hydraulic, was pushed our floor up about 6 inches. And then everything that was attached to the wall, like the shelving, fell over. So, you know, scrambled eggs kind of stuff.
I'll always remember being on, it was the corner of Nutley and Windburn Way, which is right there in the park, and the water had come up. And we were trying to figure out ways to like shore up things so that Pioneer Hall wouldn't get knocked down. And you could feel, and somebody had the name for this, I don't remember what the name is now. I think it's called bouldering, not climbing bouldering, but when large rocks are being pushed by tons of water and they roll and go boom, boom as they move, you could feel the ground shaking. And I know there were a few of us that was like, what is that? Well, those were these giant boulders that were being moved by the force of all that water and just shaking the ground, like better than your Jurassic Park movies that you watch.
As flooding progressed, sections of North Main Street and Water Street collapsed, forcing city officials to close the area. This in spite of emergency services needing to continue unhindered.
And basically made it hard to get from the south or east side of town to the north or west side of town. It made running emergency calls interesting because you had to take the long way around, so to speak.
Water Street had washed out, Nevada Street was washed out, Hersey was washed out, so you couldn't get to the north end of town, you couldn't get to the south end of town. Ashland became little mini islands.
Eventually, we were able to get some track hose that were actually working in the creek to remove a bunch of the debris, large rocks and that, so that it would the water could flow better through the actual creek. That was pretty neat to watch those guys.
The guy who was operating that either had a great deal of confidence or didn't know when to be frightened, because he was working his machine out on the debris. But eventually they managed to pull it all out, and so the water went away.
The full scope of the damage came into focus after the waters receded. Other Rogue Valley communities were similarly impacted, though Ashland's plight stood out.
The challenges changed, and the city was completely ready for it. I'd run many, many campaigns, so I had maps of the entire city for canvassers, and I was on KSOR and announced that I'd be going down to City Hall and bringing maps and encouraging people to knock on doors to make sure people were okay, that they had water or whatever. Hundreds of people were there waiting in the area outside of council chambers. Everybody was given a map and a partner, and off they went, and they canvassed the city in 2 hours. They brought back information, who was struggling, who needed help, that sort of thing.
Government officials and other residents also started the long process of digging themselves out from so much debris and damage.
People just volunteered. They just came in. Once we were in the buildings, they put dumpsters out on the plaza, and we shoveled mud and we shoveled stuff, and it would go away, and then we'd shovel some more until we had it completely clear.
The work to even, not just to work for the city fire department, but then to off duty go downtown and help remove that debris and remove those rocks and things from that business. Like, that was, cathartic in some ways. We were taking the town back.
Churches wanted to bring in their followers. There were Boy Scouts, there were Girl Scouts, there were schools, there were classrooms, there were just general people. Wheelbarrows were coming, shovels were coming.
We went and they got a bunch of engineers to come inspect. They were really concerned about the buildings there along Guanajuato, the downtown area, about them collapsing.
When you've had that kind of potential damage to a structure, you have to make sure that it will be safe to reoccupy.
People were very concerned. Of course, there were restaurants that had walk-ins with food in them and, all kinds of stuff that if we waited too long, everything would be worse. And finally, they said, okay, you can go back in, but we had to have either a fire or a police person with us, and only one person could go into the building at a time.
An ongoing problem stemmed from the city needing to shut the water off for all residents.
We had to clear the debris around the water treatment plant, which was up in the canyon below Reeder Reservoir, and we weren't sure if it was completely destroyed or not. And it wasn't, but it was covered in a lot of debris, but they kept the water shut off until that could reopen. And I think it was a few weeks.
Chief set up an EOC there in the fire department in the training room, and we're kind of handling things from there, getting water supply from, I believe the National Guard brought in water trucks and that, and getting porta potties and all that sort of thing, which was kind of the aftermath of the main part of the flood.
What a public safety response would look like during a future natural disaster began to evolve soon afterward. The evolution came in the form of a civilian volunteer force known as the Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, intended to augment firefighters, paramedics, and all others tasked with giving aid during a community's darker days.
Sometimes when you have a flood, you surf. And it certainly had focused everyone's attention on this. I was on sick leave. So They stuck me in the office and said, here's the name, find out what somebody else has done, and we want one too. Now the Community Emergency Response Team program is nationwide. There are training programs from FEMA. You can go online and get some of the training. At that time, that was simply not the case. There was no program. People in the community want to respond. You can either invest some time and some money in having a structure that will really facilitate that effort, or you don't. And the results are pretty easy to anticipate.
Weather agencies have also made significant improvements forecasting similar flood events.
The tools are getting better and better. The computer models, the higher resolution models, are more accurate with precipitation amounts. And we have river forecast centers in the National Weather Service. The nearest ones are in Sacramento and Portland. They forecast for the Rogue River, the Klamath River, the Umpqua River, the Coquille. All these rivers have forecasts for them. And these river forecast centers have gotten better and better. Even in the last 10, especially last 10 years, we've seen such advancements. Even satellites can estimate rainfall over the ocean that's coming on shore, and they're better and better at it because we have newer satellites. So we really would be using newer tools to forecast major river flooding in the region. And I think we may be surprised at how good and how well in advance we can forecast major flooding.
The flood also prompted the City of Ashland to respond with additional preparatory measures.
They rebuilt the walls in the park, and those walls aren't there just to make it pretty. They're actually can be blocked off, and so it will keep the water out of the downtown area should that happen again. And they've done some other things to make it so that the water will flow better. The more you can prepare ahead of time, the better off you're going to be. Just having a plan.
A lot of good work came out of that incident. And I honestly, like working still here in Ashland, as many years as I have, I just know that we as a department and the local citizenry here are much more prepared. There's an old saying that I remember from Officer Academy of, you always get the test before the lesson. And then hopefully you do well, even without the lesson on this. And I think we've had a few lessons that we've learned from, and so hopefully next time it will be different.
I think it's really important to roll up your sleeves and work side by side, irrespective of your position in your community or society. Was that born from the flood? No, it was, I think that was my inclination anyway, but it certainly got cemented with it.